Welcome to The Explainer. Look, today we're diving into something that carries an incredible amount of weight, especially if you live in areas like Altadena, Pacific Palisades, or Malibu. We're mapping out the crucial roadmap for navigating a wildfire rebuild in Los Angeles. Now, if you or someone you love is facing this right now, I just want to pause and acknowledge how completely overwhelming it can feel. Our goal with this explainer is to take all that chaos and uncertainty and replace it with clear, actionable structure. So, let's get right into it. You know, it's often said that losing your home in a wildfire is so much more than just a construction problem. And wow, is that the truth. It's immense grief, it's navigating endless, frustrating insurance calls, it's the sheer stress of figuring out temporary housing. And on top of all that absolute exhaustion, you're suddenly pressured to make these incredibly expensive, life-changing decisions. Look, there is absolutely no perfect choice that's going to magically replace what was taken. But we can take this step by step. We can look at the objective data to help bring some control right back into your hands.
Here's our roadmap to get there. First, the reality of rebuilding. Then, hard versus soft costs, demystifying WI and ALE, the 5 main construction methods, timelines for recovery, and finally, choosing your specific strategy.
So, part 1, the reality of rebuilding and moving step by step. Which brings us to part 2, hard versus soft costs. It's time to understand your true budget. Now, when you first start talking to contractors after a fire, you're almost always going to hear a price per square foot number. But here is the catch, and it's a big one. Those numbers usually only cover what we call hard costs. That's just the labor and materials for the physical construction of the house itself. What it doesn't include are the soft costs. We're talking architecture, structural and civil engineering, soils reports, permits, and your allowances for things like appliances and finishes. These soft costs quietly eat into a budget, and honestly, they are so incredibly easy to underestimate when you were just trying to get a roof back over your head.
And here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. Brace yourself for this one. For a lot of Los Angeles rebuilds, those soft costs will quietly add a massive $200,000 to $350,000, sometimes even more, to your overall budget. That's a heavy-hitting reality check, right? You absolutely have to factor this in before finalizing your financial plan, keeping in mind your specific scope and local agency requirements.
All right, moving on to part 3, demystifying WUI and ALE. These are the acronyms that will absolutely dictate your rebuild.
First up is WUI. That stands for Wildland Urban Interface. Basically, if you're rebuilding in a designated fire severity zone, you're in the WUI. And that means you are subject to mandatory state and local fire-resistant standards. We are talking Class A fire-rated roofing, ignition-resistant siding, ember-resistant vents, and tempered glass. Now yes, these mandatory upgrades are absolutely going to bump up your costs no matter what structural system you go with. But here's the upside. They significantly improve your home's chances of actually surviving an ember storm or intense radiant heat. So it's non-negotiable, sure, but it's also an incredibly vital investment in your family's safety.
The second big acronym you need to get familiar with is ALE, or Additional Living Expenses. This is your insurance coverage for the increased costs of daily life, stuff like temporary housing and food while your home is uninhabitable. But here is the critical thing to remember about ALE. It's got a ticking clock. It generally only lasts until repairs are complete or until a specific policy limit is reached. What does that mean for you? It means the actual speed of your construction is just as crucial as the price tag. You are literally racing against an expiring budget.
Let's jump into part 4, the 5 construction methods, looking at the spectrum of resilience and recovery.
Okay, to keep things totally apples to apples here, let's evaluate these 5 methods against a baseline 2,455 square foot Los Angeles home. If we look at Modular, that represents your lowest cost. It's what we call the speed play, coming in at around $430 per square foot. Then you've got traditional stick-built and ICF sitting right in the middle as your value and resilience plays. And finally on the far end, All-Steel and Omniblock represent your premium maximum hardened options at the top of the budget range. Let's actually break these down one by one.
First up, traditional stick-built framing. For most folks, this is the most familiar method out there. It gives you the lowest hard cost for a traditional site-built home and offers maximum design flexibility. It really fits those tight insurance limits beautifully. But keep in mind, it requires extensive WI hardening to meet local codes. And the biggest trade-off? Even with all that extra hardening, you are still left with a fundamentally combustible wood structure and you remain heavily exposed to the wild volatility of lumber prices. Now compare that to our next option, ICF, or insulated concrete forms. This system is basically hollow foam blocks that get stacked up, reinforced with steel rebar, and then filled with solid concrete. It is fantastic, it gives you a multi-hour fire rating, and creates these incredibly quiet, temperature-stable interiors. And what's really amazing? Once you factor in all those required WI upgrades for traditional wood framing, ICF becomes highly cost-competitive. Sometimes it even offers a better value for the resilience you're getting. Just remember, you do need an experienced, specialized contractor to pull this off properly.
Next up are the premium hardened options, steel and Omniblock. So, Omniblock uses grouted concrete masonry combined with steel deck framing, while All-Steel relies on full structural steel with non-combustible cladding. These options offer unparalleled peace of mind. We're talking high seismic ductility and virtually no susceptibility to rot, mold, or termites. If you plan to stay in your home for the long haul, especially in a known fire corridor, these are ideal. They do, however, cost more upfront. And listen closely, you absolutely must plan for a 10 to 15% budget escalation buffer to handle the crazy volatility in global structural steel and rebar prices.
Finally, we've got modular construction, perfectly known as the speed play. These are factory-built modules that get transported straight to your site and craned into place. Because they arrive with a lot of the interior finishing already done, it massively reduces your on-site labor costs. But homeowners, be warned. You need strict site logistics and really easy crane access for this to work. You'll also have a bit less freedom to customize your layout. And maybe most importantly, read that contract closely. The factory price usually completely excludes site work, the foundation, utilities, and things like driveways.
Moving right along to Part 5, timelines for recovery and beating those ALE deadlines.
When you contrast the timelines here, it's pretty eye-opening. A traditional site-built method usually needs a 12 to 18-month window before you can actually move in. But because modular homes are being built in a factory at the exact same time your foundation is being poured on site, families can often get back into their homes in just 7 to 10 months. When you're nervously watching a temporary housing budget just dwindle away, that time difference is absolutely massive.
But, and this is a huge but, the construction clock only starts after all the upfront work is totally finished. These timeline estimates do not include the months you'll spend on design, surveys, engineering, and the painfully slow permitting process. Plus, you've really got to watch out for sneaky local mandates. For example, some properties in Altadena are required to underground their utilities, which can easily slap an extra $20,000 to $40,000 onto the project. You've got to confirm these specific hyperlocal requirements before finalizing any plans.
Finally, Section 6. Choosing your strategy and aligning these choices with your family's needs.
Look, no matter which construction method you're leaning toward, you absolutely must build in a financial contingency buffer. Post-fire demand guarantees busy seasons for contractors. Local labor shortages and wild shifts in global material markets, whether it's tariffs or fluctuating fuel costs, will inevitably test your budget. Building in a solid buffer right from day one is exactly how you reduce those stress levels later when all these decisions start stacking up fast.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to weigh against your own family's unique constraints. Budget, timeline, or maximum resilience. Which risk actually matters most to you? Do you just need the fastest path back home before that ALR money runs out? Are you tightly constrained by an insurance payout? Are you looking to invest in a hardened, resilient shell for decades of peace of mind? By taking the data we've laid out in this explainer today, you can start aligning your rebuild approach with your real-world conditions. It's about making the long path back to your property just a little bit more manageable. Thanks so much for joining me. Keep learning, stay resilient, and I'll see you next time.